Hello and welcome back to Europa Universalis 4. I am Lord Forwind, here with another country guide, this time on the country of Oman, the pretty much Muslim trading company. I say that. They're pretty much the only Muslim country that really focuses on trade other than Hormuz here. Almost all their ideas are focused in some way towards naval power. They do not have a single land military strength. They have 15% morale of navies, naval maintenance -20, which is really strong, trade series +33%, shipbuilding -10, national sailors +10, tolerance of heathens +2. That's actually very useful. I'll explain why in a couple minutes. They have +10% trade efficiency, -15% light ship costs, -5% sailor maintenance, which is great because you don't actually have a ton of sailors in the Arabian Peninsula region. Plus this allows you to build light ships very quickly and maintain a large amount of them. +1 naval leader maneuver. You think that isn't great, but that actually increases light trade ship power, which is really useful. +1 merchants and a finishing with a blockade efficiency of +33. Not immensely useful, but will help you in trade wars if that's what you're going to wage. Now, we will note that Oman is a unique country in the Muslim religions. It is one of two Abadi nations, the other one, of course, being Mazab over here. Of course, this will change in the most recent patch, but we're pretty much sure Oman shall remain largely the same, considering this region was reworked fairly recently. They have the Anabali school, which is nice because that's 10% reduced aggressive expansion impact. It doesn't, however, outweigh the penalty you get for being Abadi in expansion, because I believe that is 25% or so aggressive expansion due to conquering people of another religion. So you're going to be fighting lots of Sunni. You're going to be fighting some Shia, depending on where you expand to. But your first priority is dealing with the people who own a good portion of your land, which is Hormuz. They own 4 of your cores at the beginning of the game. They are larger and they are in fact more powerful than you. Let me just rival them and then I can show you how this works out. So if we do rivals, they have up to 10 units, you have 8 units. They're very strong. They have lots of more money than you do. However, you have some advantages. First off, you start off as a emanate, a feudal theocracy. So you can do stuff like sanction holy war, which will get you claims on more of the land they own that you don't. You can, in fact, invite minorities from abroad, which is actually very useful early game, because it will give you 1 free development, but it will also reduce the development cost of your capital region, which, considering where you start in the desert, is not going to help you that much, but every little development is useful. I recommend waiting till you conquer Squat over here, relocating your capital here and developing on this coast. But as it is, that 20% reduced development cost will actually allow you to develop your lands rather than being stuck with desert provinces. So these are options for you to use. I recommend you do Sanction Holy War, though, get claims on the other 2 Hormuz provinces, and then you start training troops. Now, you have 2 choices. One, you can try and attack them immediately. Doesn't always work because a lot of the time they will get a good ally like the Timurids or the Naj or the Korakunalu, and then you're kind of stuck, which means you may have to wait. If you can attack them early on, which is unlikely, you want to pick a morale or discipline advisor. Obviously, I don't have the option here. They do not have any particularly strong military ideas. They're all about trade as well. However, they do have a fort here, which means you need at least 9 troops to siege that fort. This is actually kind of an issue because you're not going to be able to take their capital. That's impossible. They have a fleet, you don't. Unless you get ridiculously lucky, you have no hope. However, that means you can siege everything else. The problem is it's going to take a vast majority of your troops to siege this fort, at which point they will come in and try and take your capital. So, however, the game, kindly enough, does in fact give you, first of all, you should accept that. I just did that, reduced unrest, it's always useful. You should look at their mission tree. They have what's called Prepare for War. Build your army to force limit of 100, manpower of at least 80, number of generals of at least 1. If you do that, you get morale of armies +5, recover army morale +10. It's really useful. 5% morale early on will even up with Hormuz, especially if you get a morale that's plus 15. You should have stronger troops than they do. You do have a mission here, which after you do prepare for war, you don't get a claim because you already have cores. Your next one is essentially the mission tells you to take those 3 glowing purple provinces, your former cores, upon which you'll get claims moving down the coast here. 3 more on the line here. Of course, this is already a core, so you should retake it. Once you've done that, you get good advisors, position your troops. Hopefully they don't have any good allies. You have an option here. You can try and conquer Yas as well, or you can wait till Hormuz gets involved in a war of trying to conquer the Hassa here, upon which you can strike. Ideally, you want to stack wipe them, but above everything else, you want to take the fort here. If you can take the fort, you're golden. But do not make that your war goal. I find the best war goal is to do it on this province, Masira, down here, because there's no fort nearby, which means you can occupy it and get a ticking war score. And usually you can at least demand that province because there won't be the... not entirely positive, things change every patch. You won't get that negative 10,000 nearby fort or whatever modifier. Could be wrong, but still, having a ticking war score that will not be reoccupied by a fort is really key. Then taking the fort, I advise you trying to get a good siege ruler, 1 or 2. You can of course use your general, or you can go talk to your nobility, try and get a general there as well. You won't have to give some land to the nobles to get a good general. It just happens that way. But you usually can re-roll something useful. Yeah, like this. This is a good. That's actually a really good starting one. Plus, then you can demand military support. I advise you to focus military power. Try and get to Miltech 4. If you can get to Miltech 4 early, plus the morale bonus, plus if you get a morale advisor, you should easily be able to beat Hormuz. The trick is you don't want to take too much land. I've actually lost as Oman early on by taking too much land. Retake your 4 cores, maybe take Qazim here. Don't take these 2. You're going to cause a coalition, but you should be able to retake these 4. Depending on how things go, maybe you take 1 or 2 more. And then you pretty much build up your troops, build a navy specifically to take out Hormuz's. Probably a good portion of galleys, even though you're going to want to ship to light ship early on after the war. Enough galleys to help you defeat their fleet, take Hormuz. Hormuz is a center of trade. It's a really good province. Probably should have its own bonus for being, in the strait, sort of like what Constantinople and Denmark have, or Denmark's capital. Once you take them out, I advise you try and finish them off, because otherwise they're going to have cores on this land, and they're just a pain to deal with. Of course, the issue is the Timurids may take it and then move on you, which means you have to have a very strong fleet in this strait, pretty much for the rest of the game. If you're lucky, the Timurids collapse and you can expand that direction. But your missions encourage you to go to the south, so Mahara. They tend not to have really any good allies. Sometimes they'll ally 1 or 2 nations over here, which you can conquer. Be aware, however, being a body, it is very slow and risky to expand into Sunni provinces. It gets a little bit less risky once you get down to tolerance of heathens. Especially one of the better strategies for Oman is to go humanist, because then you are then tolerant mostly of Sunni Shia, and then you will be tolerant of all the other faiths in the world. You can pretty much, this is one of the more stable nations in terms of religion if you take humanist ideas, which I recommend you take 3rd or 4th, depending on how you're playing the game. Once you've secured the region, defeated Hormuz, obviously take Marha. Then, oddly enough, your next mission, and this is the strangest one I've ever seen, after you conquer this one, it gives you a claim on the Dhofar region, which is fine. You want to conquer that. Let's see, where is that specifically? Oh, it's just this region. Okay. Once you do that, you get a claim on, of all places, Mombasa, which is way down here. But it is worth going to get. Obviously, following your mission tree is always useful. That will give you claims on Zanzibar. You take Zanzibar, it will give you claims on, in general, just the central Swahili. Essentially, it wants you to conquer this area. Luckily, by that point, by the time you're actually ready to do that war, you should have already conquered your way down tier to Yemen, which you want to do if you can. Um, it's pretty useful. Yemen tends to stay very divided between their different factions. Once you overrun this, you should be making money and be easily able to overrun this region. You take it over, you probably want to invade this area. Ethiopia usually will conquer it, which means you can by and large fight them without any of the other Muslims getting angry with you. Jumping your way down the coast, working your way down here, you can create quite the trade empire along the coast of East Africa and Arabia. And then, of course, your ideas are very powerful. I recommend for your first idea, you probably take defensive. The reduced attrition particularly is useful because you'll be fighting in desert provinces most of the game. And the morale is just really solid overall. It'll allow you to beat most enemies of equivalent strength. Then you've got a choice. Either you can go for building a land empire, which is kind of what you should do, or you can build a naval empire, which will get you more money to build a land empire. Essentially, your choices come between influence, or if they change it, diplomatic for the aggressive expansion, or you take trade ideas. Now, trade ideas are really strong on Oman. You get goods produced, but you also, just for being Oman, you get all these wonderful little trade ideas and naval ideas, which means you should be able to build and launch trade wars, which is kind of interesting. Essentially, you blockade ports and get war score, and then you demand trade power afterwards. You can pretty much pillage most of the Indian coast, specifically the Gujarat Sindh region. You can easily win blockade wars because you'll have a much stronger navy. Oman is one of the few naval powerhouses in Asia that's not in Indonesia. So like right through here, you're one of the strongest naval countries. And also that looking at the trade map, you can steer all the trade in India, with the small exception of this wave, straight into your trade node. Obviously, once you take Hormuz, you'll get 2 centers of trade. You'll control this area. You should be able to secure a good portion of that. Lots of light ships to boost your trade power in the region. You'll be golden. You put 1 merchant here, transfer trade power north. You put 1 here in Gujarat, transfer trade power to you there. Those are the 2 you should really start with. Once you get a 3rd and a 4th one from trade, you should, of course, place them here, here, and then here. Try and get as much trade power steered in. Sadly, the trade node of Zanzibar does not go north, but you can also place 1 in Ethiopia. I should point that out now. That's a new thing. Which means once you conquer this region through your missions, you'll probably want to shift your trade node down here. There's a lot of centers of trade. This is a very rich area, lots of gold and trade goods. Then you just steer all your trade south. Interestingly enough, you can kind of, rather than steering it here, you just skip it, steer it this way. Obviously, Oman's goal is to, by and large, control this area. Not so much conquer Arabia, but expand this way. However, you have a serious problem at the beginning, and this is where I'll get into some of the expansion. You can't have any allies. Pretty much you'll have no allies for a lot of the game. If you get lucky, you can maybe pull out an alliance with someone like the Mamelukes, and then maybe the Ottomans later on. But by and large, you're going to be fighting most wars on your own, and you're not going to have any real good allies, which means you have to play very carefully. Sometimes you can ally nations like the Naj, sometimes they will join you, but of course, these guys are weak. They're really weak. Honestly, you're better off looking in India for allies, which is very difficult early on because you're so weak, which means you have to win this first war or 2 up here on your own. I advise you use some mercenaries. You usually, once you secure this area, have money to spare, and once you conquer Yemen, you have got tons of money. It's really easy to conquer this area. Once you control this area, you'll be a couple hundred development. It doesn't look like it, but this is not the worst lands. It's not good by any means, but some of these are 9 development. Also, you can improve them further. Plus, you'll get trade. You can become pretty powerful with just that small region. You're never going to be a great land power. You're more about naval power. There are a few small issues playing as these people, and I will point them out. you have issues with chartering trade companies. You can't do it because you're in Asia, which is frustrating. However, if you take over this region and then you move your capital down here to Africa, you can then buy trade company lands in India, which will allow you to steer more trade that way. On the other hand, you can buy trade company lands in Africa because they're not on your same continent, but you can't steer trade from them. So I recommend conquer this region, move your capital, move everything down here. First off, the land down here is a lot better than your silly coastal desert provinces up here, so you can develop it further. Plus you'll get more trade and can then charter trade companies. I then advise expanding somewhat into India, or at least along the coast, pick up, Sri Lanka down here, pick up the Maldives, and buy land in here. Not a terrible strategy as these guys is to take later on, take like exploration or expansion and colonize these islands. Once you control this area, no one else is going to get through here faster than you do. Plus, if you colonize the islands near Mozambique and the other ones, the Europeans will be delayed rather indefinitely to getting to this area because they hop, skip, and jump through the islands. So it will give you a power to create quite a trading empire. Obviously, then you can just eliminate people at will, expand, create more trade companies, etc., and become powerful. There is an achievement you can do as these guys. I don't know if it's entirely worth doing as Oman. They would be the strongest one. Mazab is not nearly as strong as Oman. Is the third way, start as a body, eliminate all rival schools of Islam. It's probably one of the harder achievements in the game after, conquering the world. It's difficult. But if you have to really focus hard into military ideas, defensive, then offensive, then quantity, then quality, just to even compete with nations like the Ottomans and Mamelukes, you do have the advantage that you'll be able to afford mercenaries, and almost nobody else can keep up with the sheer amount of mercenaries you can field because you'll have lots of money, which are good. In terms of reforms, you're pretty much standard ones. You start with feudal theocracy. Probably want to, if you could, you'd want to grab enforced trader privileges. Unfortunately, you can't. So you're better off usually either strengthening noble privileges for troops or curtailing them for the attacks. Considering you're in the desert, I'd honestly go with strengthening to get the more manpower, but it's up to you. You probably want to do decentralized because of the culture. I always tend to take admin, so you get a free admin policy as well. You're going to have quite a few of them as Oman. In the end, you'll have a lot. And then obviously, probably want to go for your standard absolutism approach to get stuff there. So for first idea group, defensive, probably either trade next or influence, or if they move regressive expansion to diplomatic like they're supposed to, take diplomatic. And then it's really up to you where you go. Influence at some point will be useful because you're not Shia or Sunni. Just the reduced aggressive expansion will be useful. You may wish to take religious ideas to convert the land. It's up to you. If you go humanist, you'll pretty much be tolerant of it all. You'll have a pretty solid empire. You'll have good amounts of embraced cultures. Be pretty prosperous in general. Maritime ideas is actually surprisingly good on them. One of the few countries I would advocate for. You can get like 85% blockade efficiency. You can have quite the naval empire in general. I wouldn't take that till mid to late game though. So defensive, influence, trade, probably either admin, religious, or humanist, followed by another military. You're going to be taking lots of military ideas, probably offensive for the larger army, or quantity if you're having trouble with manpower. At some point you'll want to take economic because this region down here has gold mines and you'll want them as soon as you can get them, so the reduced inflation, plus it'll reduce development so you can actually develop some of this land without a 35% penalty. But in my experience, Oman tends to play tall trading empire. Not so much wide trading empire, more tall. Focus your lands, develop them, strengthen trade, build buildings, and you're off to a pretty good start as the nation. At some point when the Ottomans expand in here, try your best to be allies with them. If you're allies with them, they won't kill you. They don't tend to get to Oman in general, but I have seen them conquer Hormuz before, so obviously be wary. Europeans are not a major threat for you. Europeans don't tend to invade this area. If you control this area, they'll try and buy land from you. I don't advise you sell it because then they tend to invade you, especially if they're Spain or Portugal. England too, to some degree. But you should be rich enough, you should be able to afford good advisors. If you can ally European power, they'll sell you the institutions. Positive things. In general, though, you can just put a stranglehold on all trade passing through these two trade nodes. If you're lucky, you can even strangle some of Lahore's as well. Steer all trade south into these areas. You can pretty much make the European great powers that rely on trade poor, at which point the Muslims are a lot stronger. So that's your best bet. Obviously, you want to save your golden age until you really need it, specifically if you fight a European or the Ottomans, etc. I don't advise you to fight the Ottomans early. If you do try and conquer them, conquer this area, take out these Sunnis first, get huge, get the same size as the Ottomans with this whole area, then consider fighting them. That's my advice. But in general, your struggle is going to be to find allies. You should have plenty of money. Once you beat Hormuz, you should be militarily pretty sound. You'll be one of the stronger nations in the area. And either convert or become tolerant of them are my recommendations. So hopefully that will help you guys with playing Oman. Again, this was requested on the community page of the YouTube channel. So if you guys want to request other nations, please put them there. If you watched this far and enjoyed it and you haven't, please subscribe, hit the notification bell and everything. And I'll see you guys all in another video. Bye for now.